completely out or not. But
Interesting.
I'm gonna try not to hit too many buttons that might cause me to lose the chat again.
My experience with Jitsi is that it does have a lot of problems. But
Okay, good to
you
know.
know, and we are playing around with Zoom because it does automatic transcripts and language translation. There's a couple other
Oh,
ones that are doing language translation too, so you can do all the subtitles in any language across the entire world. It is pretty amazing. So we're actually starting to do multi-language sessions and everything. It's pretty amazing. But
that's cool.
I know technology, right? But again, you have to have agreement to record, and so it's just there's so few places you can actually utilize it because basically anything that's going through AI systems, I just consider public because it's going through corporate and government, you know, documentation, you know. So, anyways, another reason why I love recording, and it also really helps for accessibility and having everything accessible to anyone who's hard to hear or like wanting to be able to read it and see it. So there's just so many pros to having actual public, transparent, collaborative meeting space where you can just have so much more accessibility, you know. Anyways, but it's not for
Sure.
everybody. But I just would love to find people who are open and interested in this. So let's do some check-ins. We can kind of list some possible, potential topics, and then get focused here. So and then also let me go ahead and link in the notes, kind of our public group sheet where I link all of the notes for all of the sessions that have happened. You can actually see
Okay.
exactly how many sessions we've
Time
had.
for breath. Please stop and get ready. Now inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Pause. Inhale together, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, relax.
So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This is our 14th session.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right. So my check-in would be like, um, you usually give a number, like a 3.75. So I'm feeling okay. Still overwhelmed with life. But from there, I have been working a lot on California, specifically Northern California, NorCal, GSUS. And so we finally, after a year, have a proposed structure. It's not approved. Well, it's not fully approved yet. We have consensus from 3 people, but we need to get agreement from the whole group. And it does include a little bit on conflict mediation. So I wanted to present that and see kind of where that might lead us, which I think could be kind of fun. So that's the main thing I've been doing with General Strike. Obviously, I have like 10 other projects going on, but I'll spare us all of the time on that. But yeah. So do you want to check in real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not into like specific projects aside from just, I guess, kind of self-educating and networking where I can. Just trying to get to know people online and in person, and open discussions and dialogue about different topics of concern. I'm chronically ill, so my health and family obligations kind of come first, and so this kind of stuff is sort of fit in where I get in, sort of thing. But I love to just take the time to make connections when I have the availability, and to share ideas. That's been pretty much what I've been working on. So
Nice, nice. Yeah, I mean, my personal experience is that I see a lot of people who are disabled, neurodiverse, physically have issues. Like, there's just, and obviously people who are economically disadvantaged, who make up, in my experience, the majority of people who are involved in community movements, especially like online stuff. And, you know, I don't think it's really acknowledged very much, or like actually building systems that work in that context. Like, you can imagine that the people
Time to
who are
pause. Please stop. Close your eyes.
The
Count.
people who are
1, 2,
most
3, 4,
engaged and
5.
interested in addressing either political or issues like as a community are going to be the people who are most affected by it, and need
Yeah.
support and help, so but in our society we look at everything the opposite way, right? And then we support leadership based on people who have the most, right? It's like really weird. So anyways, that is a separate thing, but one of the things we address in our co-op models is that, and of course we're not particularly successful with building these decentralized co-ops, but we're trying to. But one of the components that we would like to launch is the life support system. So we talk a lot about mutual aid. I don't totally understand mutual aid in the context of the strike and like all that. I mean, I understand the idea of like helping people get food, helping people get shelter, helping people get emergency services, like just having like the most basic aid to survive. But for me, I'm more into like just complete and total broad level support, like helping people as human beings for whatever they need, including health, wellness, stability, money, anything, and it's just like, I'm not sure how that fits in to the mutual aid framework. So for me, I just talk about life support. It's like, okay, everyone's equal, everyone has life support. So if we have an hour, everyone gets 10 minutes, and there's 10 people or 6 people, and each person gets 10 minutes, and you talk about each person's life and how we can support them and help them in whatever way that person needs support, So for me, life support is definitely a key component, because sometimes people don't know what it is they would even want or how exactly it would apply to them, and trying to have everything exactly the same for everyone can be a lot. Anyways, very, very interesting and core topic to so many different things. So I'll note these down. So potential topics, we have, support, aid, wellness, life, and then we have accessibility, structures. And then for me, the main thing I was interested in talking about for today was the idea of the conflict mediation within GSUS. And then we can also talk about the broader context, broader context of conflict and issues in the bigger picture. I'm even working on some new proposals and ideas for like looking at the core of society, where you have like, Palestine and Israel, right? Which is sort of like the centrifuge of our societal.
Time to take a break.
Look, we're at the
Please
break
stop.
point.
Write down whatever
So
you were about to say and take a break for 6 minutes.
in our co-op model, like at the bottom of the hour and the top of the hour, we take quick breaks just to like let people go to the bathroom and that kind of stuff. But anyways, you don't have to take a break now, but you can just note it that we're at that point in our time. But anyway, so just like, broader like peace movements and just understanding like the most hardcore conflicts, and how do you actually solve them? Because I think that you can apply all the things that we talked about last time to international conflicts and actual peace movements, right? So anyways, all those things are super exciting for me to talk about. Is there anything in particular that you want to do, that you would like to talk about?
I guess I don't know about specific. I know you mentioned that you're a little unfamiliar on mutual aid, and is that for like a lack of educational material on the topic, or
Unfamiliar with what? What was it?
Mutual aid?
Oh yeah, mutual aid. Yeah, I don't know exactly how I personally fall into mutual aid. I get the general concept, but I have tons of questions. And if you are an expert on mutual aid, I'm definitely down to talk about mutual aid for sure.
I am in no way an expert, and I have not done the reading yet, but I have been hoarding digital books, digital reading material, specifically on mutual aid, and it's on the list. So I guess I was thinking I can share some resources or something. Yeah. Because a lot of the, I guess, more like anarcho-communist focused pages that I follow really, really reinforce the importance of mutual aid and provide those resources for, gaining knowledge and why they focus so much on it. So, that was one thing that I was thinking of. Again, this tends to be my level of involvement right now, is educating myself so that I can share knowledge and resources with other people and have these discussions.
Great.
That's like my primary point. And so as I'm reading stuff and educating myself, I'm trying to share as much of what I find relevant with others. So that's one thing that was similar to like all the conflict resolution stuff we were talking about last time. When it came to Tech Mill and when it came to the book Beyond Survival, and things like that. When it comes to international conflict or even national conflict, I guess, I see some differences between, level, I think we all do need better conflict resolution skills on an individual level, and that having those skills on that level, and as well as like media literacy, those two things could become very important critical thinking skills for preventing large-scale conflict. When I look at large-scale conflict, I most often come to, breaking it down further and further. What I often see is a divergence in underlying value systems between different factions. So yeah, that's sort of the crux of things that I keep coming back to, and those value systems can be very difficult to what's the word I'm looking for? To I know there's a word for it and I can't think of it, but to bring together, because some values are like fundamentally at odds. So even having good conflict resolution skills, if our values are at odds, it can become very, very difficult to work through and find an understanding between opposing sides. And I feel like I see that more in national and international struggles, where you have, very strong othering going on. But again, education about different value systems and who values what and why can bring a level of understanding that can maybe help to bridge some of those ideological gaps that we will inevitably continue to run into, because we have values determine the culture that we are in, that any individual is in. And without having a certain degree of curiosity about cultures and values that differ from our own, we're going to continue to run into regular conflict.
It's 4 o'clock. Time
Definitely.
to start. Please get focused on the session.
Very, very cool. So, lots to unpack there. So going, and also Bubbles jumped in and jumped out. So I'm just gonna note Bubbles and make sure she knows that we saw her. And I'm gonna be using this particular, I think this is it, server here. Bubbles, yeah, Bubbles is here. Saw you in the public session. We are chatting about conflict resolution. Thanks for stopping by. All right. And let me link this as well. So create invite, copy, and I'll link this here link to Discord server. This is the public Discord for national. And then, oh yeah, Bubbles is responding. Cool. Awesome. Then I'll also put a link on our notes here, the info. Link to national. Perfect. So yeah, lots to unpack there. So many things I'd love to respond to, because I definitely agree with what you're saying. For me, the two primary things that come in our models for conflict and contention is the idea, well, actually there would be three things. There's like core values and principles. And then you have what we would call like issues, and then we have what we would call conflict. So, and then we put this all kind of under the context of contention, right? So I would say that core values as a concept, oh, yes. You are welcome to come back for sure. So yeah, maybe Bubbles will come back. So for me, the core values and principles is sort of like a separate thing, because the foundation to your mission, the foundation of your values and principles just is everything, right? And then, so typically issues and conflict are outside of the area of core values and principles and mission, right? Because typically within an organization, you have agreement on the values and the principles and the mission. Otherwise, you typically wouldn't even be interacting with each other, right? Oh, look, Bubbles is back. So Bubbles, would you like to check in and just reminding everybody we're recording, everything's recorded, documented, all that fun jazz does. I actually sometimes like to just click. Oh, I can't do that. But Bubbles, you want to check in real quick and say hi, how you're doing? You can do a number from 1 to 9 and what you've been working on, things like that. Check in. Oh, you think you're on mute still? I don't know. I'm having trouble with your audio. I'll just mention on Discord. Bubbles, can't hear you. Alright, cool. So going back to what I was saying here, and then we'll come back to Bubbles when we can do that, is the three main issues is typically you're not focusing on core values, principles, and mission. Because if you're focusing on the core values, the principles, and the mission of an organization, you're talking about whether or not the organization should exist at all, and whether or not anyone should even be present, and anyone should even be talking and discussing anything at all, right? So in a coalition environment where you're dealing with separate organizations, that might come up, but even typically a coalition has its own mission, and there's like a common mission and common set of values between all of the different organizations involved, which all each have their own core values and principles and mission, right? So in that context, I think core values, principles, missions kind of supersede everything else, and should be addressed almost in a different way. But for me, they're very similar to issues and can be looked at as an issue, especially in the context of what we use the term that I use, like the strategy coalition. So for me, conflict is really the core issue of everything. It's basically that which cannot be solved with any policy or any potential decision, right? So no decision can solve conflict. In other words, conflict is not words, it's not proposals, it's not any sort of thing that relates to a noun or a tangible structural concept. It's more of a feeling. It's like when you don't trust someone, you're never going to just magically trust them because someone told you to, right? It's like when you don't feel comfortable around someone because they hurt you, that is going to sometimes the only thing that can solve it is time, period, right? So when you're dealing with conflict, it's more about listening and communicating and understanding and building relationships over long periods of time to try to just even be able to start the conversation, right? So for me, it's very important to separate out issues, which are specific things that can be solved with proposals, specifically proposals on policy changes, structural changes, any issue or difference in a process, right? So process questions. So we're just doing quick breath if you want to breathe here at the rhythm. So the issues, I think, is really important. So if you go into the issues, the core of all possible issues are the core values and principles in the mission, right? Because it's like, okay, well, what if the issue is that we're not focusing on the right mission? And an example is that in my experience with GSUS, I've spent the vast majority of my time talking and discussing mutual aid. And I don't have a problem with that. If that's what people want to do, that's fine. But there are thousands of mutual aid organizations out there, and there's only one general strike organization, right? So for me, I would prefer the model where our mission is to put on the general strike and to, with the concept and the tools that mutual aid exists and that we will access mutual aid with the intention of the strike and that the strike will bring more mutual aid into existence. Because if we only focus on mutual aid for 90% of our time and we are always trying to set up something that there's 1,000 other organizations also setting up, we might never strike because we're never going to be ready, Whereas if we just focused on a mission that was specific to the strike and we only focused on striking, so that would be an example of a mission issue, which again can be solved through structural decisions and processes as opposed to conflict, which can't be solved, right? So anyways, even at the core level of strategy coalition, through parallel strategic models and structural models, you can solve a lot of core values and principles and missions with parallel models. So anyways, hopefully that sort of makes sense. But I'll just stop there. I don't know if Bubbles is back in terms of getting your voice. I can't unmute. Huh, that's weird. Definitely can't unmute you either.
She may just have things going on in the background, was kind of the way I interpreted that.
Yeah, okay. Well, you can always type as well if you want to type something, Bubbles. Yeah, so anyways, for me, that's pretty key. So for me, I would put core values, principles, and mission on the issues side because I think technically speaking, it is, especially in a decentralized model, they're very, very solvable in parallel models of organizing. Like you don't need to, another example would be public and private, right? Like you were never, it's like oil and water. You can never force people. It's a consent issue as well. You can never force people who want a private conversation that's not recorded to go into a call with recordings and public broadcasting. That's never going to happen, right? It's a core value principle change. It's a strategic differentiation that you'll never be able to mix. But it's an easy problem to solve through strategic coalitions and parallel models of organizing. Because you can have one group that meets publicly, you can have another group that meets privately, and then there can be a little overlap, and it's done. And there's no actual issue if you have agreement on a structural concept. So for me, that's not really a conflict in the context of something that's unsolvable through a proposal in a structural evolution, right? Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense in that context. I think I was thinking a little more broadly when you had mentioned before, like Palestinian and Israeli conflict and things like that. I was thinking of more like, how do we educate our populations, not specifically in the context of GSUS, but I think, a lot of that makes sense. With me referring to values, the difference in values between different cultural, subcultural groups has a lot more, like, that is a lot of what I see the root of conflict may be. You have like your far right or alt-right types who have very different values about, human life even than people you would find in the leftist sphere of influence and thought. And so I was thinking of more like coming to a level of understanding of what the differences are in those value systems so that we can better bridge those gaps, but not necessarily like within an organization like GSUS. You're right. A lot of people are going to have similar values coming into this, although I do think that we need to be careful that we aren't overstating the similarities between values, because a lot of people come into the general strike understanding that things need to change for a variety of reasons and in a variety of ways, but to assume that we share wholeheartedly our value systems, I think, could lead to potential conflicts. And so I think it's important, like you were saying, to have like a vision and mission kind of laid out that we can refer to, but then also maintain some flexibility so that we can, as potential, not conflicts, but what was the other word that you used for that? Contentions arise, that we have a system in place for working through those, maybe misunderstandings, or, finding ways in which we can clarify and make more united statements. Because, yeah, everybody's coming from a different background, and I think to assume that we're all already of one mind when it comes to values definitely could cause potential problems. But within the culture of the organization, when it comes to things like mutual aid, I think it's important that we understand, to the best of our ability, what it is that mutual aid is and why they're focusing on that so much. I think, for a lot of people, from the ones that I've heard of and looking from a historical perspective, a lot of them are focusing on maybe mutual aid in the sense of building not necessarily new mutual aid organizations. You're right, a lot of those already exist. But in order to be able to have a successful strike, we are going to need strike funds, which would be hopefully collected and aggregated on either, a local, regional, or national level, so that we can sustain the strike. We're probably also going to need, legal support. So whether that is included in the strike fund or funding for the strike fund under the same umbrella, or whether that needs to be a separate fund within the organization, we're going to need legal funds. And again, that could be different things too. We may need bail funds at some point if there's protest actions taking place. And we're also going to need, to pay lawyers to file lawsuits or to defend, striking workers. So there's going to be a need for a lot of financial security systems to be set up before a strike has any chance of being successful, because we do need to make sure that anybody who's participating in it has their basic needs met, whether that's, food, housing, medical, other types of accessibility, as you mentioned earlier. So if people are kind of linking the mutual aid component with the strike funds component, if they're kind of equating the two or some fashion, that would be a step in the direction of solidifying the sustainability of a general strike. So yeah, that's just some thoughts on some of the
Very,
things
very
that have been
interesting.
discussed so far.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. All these things you're bringing up. It's kind of changing topics, which I think is great. So responding to this, it's like, oh wait, oh yeah. So couple weeks ago, the last time we met, it was right after I got removed from the Discord, and I wasn't able to communicate on the national Discord, and they eventually re-added me, or I was able to get back in, right? So I was like kicked for, I don't know, maybe like 6 days or something like that, like a week. So in the context of one of the core issues, which for me was very clearly core value issues, because it's all related to this globalization of GSUS. And so I figured that, okay, if we're globalizing, then we are inviting all the countries together and we're building a new structure at the global level. But there's obviously a very different value system where they wanted everything to be controlled by the United States. And the United States was presenting this to the world, and everybody had to be vetted and verified by the United States. And I had a huge core value issue with that because it sounded imperialist, right? It just basically the idea that the United States controls everything and the vetting and how every single other country gets involved seemed very odd to me. And obviously, I'm more into public open systems and all that stuff. So, anyways, there's core issues, but one of the issues that came up was the idea of the website that I created had a link to a fundraising. Obviously, we haven't raised a single dollar, but the idea that general strike groups and having decentralized fundraising wouldn't be allowed to do that is, of course, a major problem. And we also are talking about this in Northern California in terms of setting up our own website and actually having fundraising for Northern California. But I think what you bring up here is a very, very good point. I would just simplify it by saying you need core organizing, you need funding, you need legal and lawyers, you need local support and aid, right? So, and this is barely the tip of the iceberg. So, in the concept of like organizing a general strike at the national level, from what you just said, which I completely agree with you on, the amount of strategic decision making and accountability is, and what I would say, just like at least 50 times more significant than what currently is allowed, right? Because the way that it's presented to me is that no one needs to talk about anything. Everything's already decided. Everything's pre-established, and you just need to go and get people on the web or LinkedIn and just do outreach, or something like that. It's like it's very, very odd the way that everything is presented, and that you can't actually address anything and actually make decisions on anything. So for me, what you're saying would involve a much more significant structure for decision making and addressing issues in actual conflict, right? Because right now issues are just not addressed at the national level, which is a recipe for disaster, right? Which I think is kind of what we're already experiencing. Maybe Bubbles is back. We have it on a different line. Maybe we can unmute now. At least try to ask to unmute, maybe. Maybe it's not working. Certainly hope so. Certainly hope it works. Anyways, that was just my response to that. Oh, yay, there you are, Bubbles.
I'm here.
Yay.
I'm here. Yay.
Cool. Do you want to check in, say how you're doing, number from 1 to 9, or what you've been working on, all that kind of good stuff?
All right. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How about an 8? I had a great in-person meeting in Napa yesterday with Not Too Serious and Canadian Girlfriend, and it was lovely. And I thought there was a meeting today, and so I was scrolling around and I saw you guys, and yeah, this is a great conversation about, I guess, about accountability and doing a strike fund and conflict resolution.
Yeah, mainly conflict resolution. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you want to chime in on anything, Bubbles, since you haven't spoken yet?
No, I'm still catching up.
Cool. Yeah, and the notes from last meeting were quite extensive with lots of links and details. Like, May, I don't know how to pronounce your name very well. Janome is has a lot of experience. Jomi.
Nomi.
Nomi.
No.
Jomi?
Nomi has a lot of
Nomi, like a gnome.
Oh.
But Nomi has a lot of experience and resources for conflict mediation and resolution. It's really cool. So we and we both basically are in agreement that any movement, any organization, any like big anything related to making the world a better place, the core of it will always be conflict mediation and addressing problems and issues. Because there's just no such thing as any organization or movement or anything that doesn't have issues and conflicts and contention and problems, right? So if you don't know how to address those, you're automatically fail already. And that's part of what I'm seeing, is that we don't have good ways of actually addressing problems, which is just, it leads everything into a brick wall,
Yeah. Yeah, I think GSUS policy is just step away, cool down, and then I guess pretend like it didn't happen.
I do have a saying that does come in handy, in terms of like, as far as I'm concerned, it never happened. But for me, that's
Yeah.
really related to gossip. Like gossip and calling people names and doing stupid things. It's just like there's a whole bunch of things that actually are great to pretend like they never happened. But when it's actual a core issue and core values and issues related to the mission and strategy and like actual organizational things, to ignore those is just a death spiral for an organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We have to be able to, like you say. I mean, all of this is conflict sort of resolution. There are the whole system. I mean, we have a conflict, and we have to resolve it somehow. Are we withholding our labor?
Yeah. So one interesting thing to ask you about, Nomi, is that I don't think it's an argument per se, but I would question the concept that organizations don't exist, right? Because even at the highest level of militaries in war and basically governments, they literally are organizations and corporations. I mean, that's what they are. So
Right.
without an organization, without a corporation, without some type of structural framework, there really isn't a war. There really isn't a major conflict in society, because people are just farming and feeding their families and hanging out and doing their things, if there's no structural organizational concepts, right? So that's the one thing that I heard from you that I would
Um,
question in terms of you know, how do we address these issues? Because it's a great thing to say. People love to say it. Oh, there's no organizations. Oh, there's no way we can address this in any sort of
oh,
structural way.
I
And
don't.
so then it's just like, okay, there's no solutions.
Oh, I don't. I think I must have been misinterpreted because I don't. That's not what I intended to say at all.
Yeah, let's go. Let's hit the button.
There's. Yeah. Yeah. No. I believe there are plenty of organizations. I don't know which part.
Well,
Yeah. I'm
I
trying
can
to
rephrase it.
think
Like you
back. What
specifically said, I'm not going to do the quote or anything, but you specifically said something related to, because I was talking about Palestine and Israel at one point as a bigger level, and then you were mentioning how that it's different between like GSUS versus Palestine Israel and societal problems, that they're basically different and might not be applicable or something. Do you remember when you were talking about that?
Um. I think. I think we were getting onto like different. I was building off of what you had said about Palestine and Israel, and that's when I was saying about how there's differences between individual conflicts within an organization and larger group conflicts, like between nations or within national levels. Um, so, like, the mentality is a little bit different between whether you're dealing with a group that does share core values, or two different groups that each share their own core values that differ from one another, and individuals who may have some contention that may have to do with their values differing. But no, like organizations are definitely a huge thing that we would need to, um, I mean, definitely need to acknowledge. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where
Yeah.
the rest of that came in.
Yeah. I think that's
But
exactly what I was alluding to. So it's just a matter of finding the right vocabulary and understanding it, because I think this is a really important point that comes up a lot in my experience, and it's hard to even talk about because we don't have vocabulary for it. So I'll try to give another example of my perspective, is that you know what we're talking about is a massive strike with tens of millions of people that affects an entire society of hundreds of millions of people and governments across the entire country, which represent, a lot of different perspectives, right? That would be involved in negotiations, right? So the whole point of a strike is that we're grinding things to a halt to force negotiation
mm-hmm.
between groups, right? So for me, there is just so many layers and levels even within our own model, right, of building a general strike, that the idea that it is a little in itty bitty personal things of a people, I don't quite understand that. I mean, for me, it's that we're talking about such a huge project. It is the highest level societal interactions, at least within the United States, if not globally, and so I don't quite see the differentiation. So let's just take some ideologies. You know, in my mind, there is a certain perspective in GSUS that would like to just get rid of 97% of the population, right? Or like 96, 95%, right? And that we were just only looking for the 3.5% that all align with the same idea, right? Which I think is a terrible concept because it's going to be extremely hard to do. I understand the idea of it, of why you would want a very, very radical, very specific group of people who are controlling the strike. But in reality, what makes a lot more sense is democracy, right? And having a democratic strike where everybody's invited to the table and we're trying to build coalitions in a broad spectrum. Obviously, it's obviously going to be more left leaning, right? Because if you are in the right, you don't need to strike. You already have all the power, right? So, in the context of, you know, at least in the short term, right? So, but in the context of understanding that, for me, there's a ton of ideological differences that can be addressed within structural parameters, as opposed to just forcing everyone to just go at it with each other. You know what I mean? Even within the very, very left radical groups. So, so for me, it's just like I don't quite see the differentiation between societal structures of, like, Palestine and Israel issues, and then what we're trying to do within the general strike in the United States and across the world. I mean, we even have it on the website as one of the categories is literally Palestine and Israel. Let's see what it says on the website. So,
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to continue to clarify the point, but there may be contention between individuals within the organization because something is unclear, and these two individuals have been coming from different backgrounds that have different values. And so that needs to be discussed and worked through until there's no longer conflict, until the issues have been resolved. And that's very possible with people who have a unifying, overarching goal, such as a general strike. But I guess I was thinking about when I'm not thinking about the perspective that individuals or even that the organization of the general strike has, like their views on the Palestinian conflict. I was actually just thinking about like the two sides, like Palestine versus Israel, in their own, the conflict that led up to that, all of the history there. Not so much about like the opinions or the position that the general strike is taking on that conflict. That the general strike is like, and you're right about the coalition building too. Like that's sort of what I'm looking at is there are going to be leftists of all flavors coming into this, and they're going to have some ideas of what they believe needs to change and needs to happen in order to meet the goals that they have imagined. But the general strike as a whole can be kind of a collection of various grievances that we want to be resolved through the action of collectively striking. But different grievances may bear different weight to different groups or individuals. They're going to, people are going to prioritize what's most important to them when it comes to that. And so in the organization of the general strike, understanding that people are going to have those individual differences and trying to accommodate and resolve any of those differences before we move, collectively, so that everybody is heard and understood, and everybody, maybe not everybody, but every differing viewpoint is heard and understood, so that we can get behind the movement and form those coalitions, that coalition, so that we can take action together is like really important. And I think when we're working with people who do share some aspect of our vision, we're coming from a values perspective of like part of the values of the people who are making this up are to act collectively and to be supportive and caring of one another and to provide the basic necessities of life. Whereas, our opponents on the far right are much more concerned with profit, hoarding resources, and oppressing others so that they can get a leg up themselves. Like those are kind of the very fundamental values that differ between our groups, and but not so much within our groups. I feel like we're pretty united in a lot of the things that I said that I've noticed are values on the left. There may be more. I mean, there's certainly more to it than simply that, but that gives us a solid ground from which to build off of, and hopefully we can work through the rest of the differences that people may have and what they value more strongly or less strongly, so that we can continue to cooperate and work together, and provide for people's needs throughout the strike.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that we will have some difference of opinions on the different demands that we have, and it would be good if we could start talking about that stuff. The kind of go through the demands and have ranked choice voting, and it's been my idea that would bring people back into being involved again, because it seems like we have people come in and we say, look at the welcome packet, we have all this stuff, and we're in phase one, and we're not really doing anything. I mean, we are doing mutual aid and mapping our communities and stuff like that, but people aren't engaged in that as much as when we did have the ability to vote on the demands. And I think that crashed the server or something, and that's why they took it down.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The what? Oh, are you done? You keep going.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
You're sure? Okay. Yeah. On the General Strike Global website that I did that, huge conflict over and why they banned me and everything, I actually put all of the demands as votable. Like the whole idea is to vote on them. Obviously, we do score voting just because score voting and star voting is a little bit more scientific, because if you have 100 demands and you're trying to rank 100 things, just way too complicated. So you just look at each individual demand by itself and you say, okay, how do I like this demand between 1 and 10? And then you don't have to think about any other demand, and you can just rank 3 of them instead of having to rank 100, So anyways, that is just an example of some of the work that I did a year ago. But in the context of what Nome was saying, which I think is just incredible, because I'll probably just reread this. Understanding that people are going to have individual differences and trying to accommodate and resolve those differences before we move collectively to hear and understand every differing viewpoint, and make sure every differing viewpoint is heard and understood, and can get behind the movement, and from those coalitions then so we can take action together, right? So for me, that statement right there is the core of everything, right? And what is so beautiful of that is a couple things. One, this actually goes back to the idea of the coalition strike, like the strike coalition that I'm actually proposing and been working on, where it's like striking is such a huge thing. To think about it like an organization is very odd. It makes so much more sense to think about it. Okay, there's many organizations, millions and millions of people all coming together from lots of different viewpoints to do a strike. So for me, it almost feels like more of a coalition model and structure than an organizational where one small group controls everything, right? Because it's like, how is a single organization, a single perspective gonna oversee an entire national strike. You know, like I could give examples in other countries, but typically there's movements of many organizations coming together to put on general strikes in other countries, and many different unions and different, you know, organizations and perspectives. And so the model of like basically forcing everything to go through a single basically bottleneck of people to oversee everything seems odd. So that's just one thing I heard. Taking away the coalition perspective and even just doing the organizational model, it's still so key to hear and understand each differing viewpoint. And I think that's really one thing that we could focus on moving forward here. I would love to, you know, 'cause I think a successful general strike is that right there. It's just dealing with the conflict and the contention between internal ideologies and ideas and issues and demands, as well as external ones, because if we ignore the external ones, then we can't be successful in negotiations either, right? We have to think about all of the perspectives simultaneously, and then addressing that as a conflict, right? Because it is a conflict. Like, we wouldn't be striking if we were all happy, right? So the idea that there's no conflict, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Like, why would we all be so enraged and so upset that we want to shut down the entire economy and gain power and control back, right? That is a root of a conflict and a root of a contention that needs to be addressed. And it's about hearing people are pissed, people are upset, and they come to general strike and they talk about being upset and wanting to see change, and then they're told to basically shut up and do it. They're told, you know, this is what you're allowed to do here. It's very, very controlling, very, very specific what you can do within the general strike, and then a lot of people leave, right? So in the context of some next steps, I think the main next step, if we had time now, would be to just look at our conflict models and then to develop and improve them within general strike itself. Because we talked a lot about, like Nome, we talked a lot about all of the possible models of conflict mediation, all that in the bigger perspective, but we didn't really talk about what GSUS has. So that would be, for me, the best next step. But anyways, let's go to Bubbles and then we'll go back around. And oh, no, Bubbles already went. So then to me, so now it goes back to Nome.
Yeah, I would love to know more about what the structure of GSUS currently is and how much flexibility there is, and, you know, potentially reworking things that may not be working for everybody. I haven't explored, learned enough about sociocracy and stuff like that. I know it as a term, but looking a little bit more into how something like that is built versus like consensus building, or versus other forms of decision making. I do think we need to have like a strong democratic model, rather than any type of top-down structure. And I think that's really important for the way that the GSUS planned this was the decentralization. To have each, hub, whether that's, like a community or regional level or state level, have all of the different units ask the same questions and come up with solutions, and then move that forward in a democratic fashion, maybe with representatives rather than individuals, but so that we don't crash the server. Have every group have some autonomy, but also make sure that we are on the same page and we're answering the questions that people are bringing up and the issues that are arising. I personally, coming from what I've learned so far, feel like economic democracy is, equally important to political democracy, and both need to be taken into account. But other people may not have that perspective. They may have different sources that they're building off of and learn different things. But bringing those issues up, so that they can be decided on in a situation of informed consent between all parties, so that the decisions aren't being made centrally when our entire coalition is intended to be decentralized. Yeah, that's probably all I got to say on that.
Bubbles, you're next.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how. I don't think GSUS really has a conflict resolution decision making process at this point. Is that what you guys understand? I mean, we've been talking about it.
Well, we have a general code of conduct, right? So for me, my understanding is that the official GSUS conflict management everything is the code of conduct. So I'll link that, and then I think that is really a starting point. And then we have the proposal that we're working on for Northern California. So I mean, just so you understand, Nomi, I can't remember where you're from, but me and Bubbles are in Northern California, so we can control Northern California in the concept where we can democratically make decisions and do what we want. Anyways, I'll go back to Bubbles because I'll just answer your question. You haven't finished.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, the code of conduct, and there's another thing that's floating around, that we're supposed to be kind of trying to implement, and I don't have. Where is it? I'm not sure where it is to share.
Is it on that orientation the new orientation website?
Yeah, I'll look for it. You guys go ahead. Pass.
Okay, I'll go next. Yeah, I can go next. Great. So yes. So, it would take me, I don't know, an hour, maybe more, to explain all of the conflict resolution, decision-making policies, and structure relationship to the co-op and the African Community Network, which is the network that I founded, right? Which is not particularly successful or got any much going on, but anyway, I'm still working on it. It's like my pet project, my baby, right? So, but within that hour, I can send, or within 2 or 5 minutes, I can give a link that links to 90% of the information, and people can figure things out, right, on their own.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is that most organizations, whether it's the bylaws of the organizations or the policies or whatever, typically there is an access point for, like, not everything, but like the most core functional issues of conflict mediation, making sure things are legal, making sure that you're, making decisions, things like that. So those type of questions should be able to be answered pretty quickly, So either way, the code of conduct I think is a really good place to start, and we can play around with that. And then we also have the voting form that we've drafted for California, which is basically like our structure. And I'm just going to copy out the part of conflict resolution. So basically the key to our conflict resolution, and this also goes into what Nomi was saying in relationship to specifically decentralization, is that for me, there's different types of decentralization, and different types of decentralization have different models. So for example, to have decentralized distributed power structures, you by definition need centralized decision making. Because without centralized decision making, nobody even knows where to go to make a decision. And if you don't know where to go to make a decision, then you're not even empowered. You have no say in anything because you can't even be involved in the discussion. So without centralized communication and distribution of knowledge and information and discussion on decisions, you can't have distributed, decentralized power structures, right? So those go hand in hand. So for me, the key of our model is that the main group is tasked with setting up the communications, moderation, and conflict resolution circle, and that the rules that report directly to the main circle or the main group, right? We're building this main group. We're still trying to remove circle for accountability and oversight of all policies for who is included, excluded, and banned. So the idea is that we can create these different conflict resolution policies, but that they are controlled by everybody together because it affects everybody, and who is banned, who is going to be silenced, who is going to be excluded, and who is going to be included, right? Because these are the core policies of these conflicts that we're addressing. And so they're accountable to everybody, which is the main group, right? And like, this is just at the Northern California level, but you can have many different levels and have a distributed or decentralized structure. But when decision making happens, you know where to go within your level of the structure, right? So for me, the what I see with GSUS is that we have a lot of words like sociocracy, but we don't actually practice sociocracy, right? We could certainly, I know a lot about sociocracy. I think I know more about sociocracy than pretty much anyone I've expressed or talked with, and no one wants to hear what I know. Of course not, right? Why would they want to know what I know? Because that would potentially change what already exists, right? Because everybody wants to continue what already exists because everyone's comfortable with that, right? So for me, the easiest way to describe it is that no one wants structure. Everyone's against structure because the structures that have existed in the world have hurt and oppressed them, and so they don't want to develop structures, including even democratic structures, because majorities have hurt minorities in the past, right?
Sure.
And so for me, that is a core evolutionary component of GSUS, where I think that the model is like have as little structure as possible, which in my mind just creates a shadow back end decision making model that's very structured. It's just people don't see it, right? It's just in the background, right? You know, the more you try to hide something, the more it really just is there. It's just you can't see it as well. Anyways, my main question for you, Nome, is you mentioned economic democracy. I am very interested in that as a vocabulary term and want to know anything and everything you would describe that as. And that's the only main question I had for you. And then, you know, going back into the code of conduct, understanding details of that, it would be my start. But I mean, the more you can teach me about economic democracy, the more I would just love it. Because like economic democracy is almost a misnomer, you know? So it would be great to have a better understanding of your perspective of that. Check.
So economic democracy would be essentially just socialism and or, you know, communism. It would be where people have equal influence on decision making, on policy making within their communities and or within their larger, I'm not sure if we would even have nations or nation states at that point, but within their governments. Because right now we have capitalism and what we claim is political democracy, but we know better based off of the, was it a Princeton study? I always forget which one it is. I think it was the Princeton study that came out in 2014 that very clearly stated that we live in an oligarchy. The U.S. is an oligarchy because what people say is important to them, what they vote on, has zero effect on the actual laws, even though we are supposed to be a democracy. So you cannot have, the Citizens United decision where money is considered free speech, because money, as we all know, is not free. So if you have a system in which money is equated to speech, and money holds power, like it holds the power over all aspects of our lives. You absolutely cannot have a true political democracy within a capitalist system because money trumps everything, profit trumps everything. So when I say economic democracy, I'm really talking about like socialism and or, should the eventual elimination of currency ever happen, it would be communism. A moneyless, classless, stateless society. We're a long way from that, but putting an emphasis on that equal representation, regardless of class or economic standing, is like super important. And so, yeah, I guess economic democracy is one way to maybe not use the scary words like socialism, but it's essentially the equivalent of that.
Yeah, socialism should not be a scary word. Communism, I think we can leave that one as a scary word, but we seriously need to embrace socialism as a, like, hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about, sort of response to, oh, socialism.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I mean, the Red Scare did a lot of damage, unfortunately. We had
Yeah.
The what did a bunch of damage?
the Red Scare.
What's the red? Oh, the Red Scare from the McCarthy era and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, McCarthyism
Yeah.
did a lot of damage, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm a big fan of just like reality, or I guess the better perspective is actuality. So reality is the perceived experience that we have, whereas actuality is something you can't perceive. It exists in the background, and it's the physical makeup or the quantum makeup of the entire universe is actuality, right? We can't perceive it because we don't even understand it, right? And it's so much more complicated than what the finite tiny bit of information that we can even process as humans. And so it's just like our reality is really just a perception, it's a perspective, it's a mirage of what actually exists. And for me, there is no actual single system. The idea that there can only be communism, that there can only be socialism, that there can only be capitalism, there can only be one system, I don't think actually exists in the actual experience of humanity. And even within our existing system, where we have massive capitalist, overarching power dynamics, we have simultaneous um, communist corporate communism, right? Where we have a communist system to support large multinational corporations, right? It's very, very interesting, the dynamics at play, right? So for me, in understanding what actually exists, it is and will always be this mix. Like even in societies that are completely, as you say, moneyless, classless, and stateless societies, like let's just take Star Trek as an example of a futuristic society. There are many, many planets in the Star Trek universe that are fully capitalist based and monetary based and are basically casino planets, right? So there is never going to be a time where everything is the same, where there's only one system, right? Even in a moneyless, classless, societalist society, there could still be small pockets of different types and different ways of functioning within economies, which I think is diversity, right? So finding a solution, I completely agree with you, everything you're saying here in relationship to, that the capitalist model that we have is out of control, and that, you can't have a true political democracy without within a capitalist system like we have now, and that money trumps everything and capitalism trumps everything, which is actually the perfect metaphor for like Trump being the commander of the world, right? It's like it's like yes, it is trumping the billionaire class. All of the freaking capitalists are trumping everything, and it's just so blatant right now. Now is the perfect timing to end it all, you know. So I think all of that is very in alignment with GSUS, and I think you're showing how democracy as a principle is in alignment with GSUS vision and principles to actually be, um, ending capitalism. Like I truly believe that democracy can help us end capitalism in building super majorities and majority coalitions of people. I think is very, very powerful, because when you have a majority, you have power. And majorities and supermajorities protect minorities, right? So, anyways, I could go on and on, but I really like what you're heading into here, and I think these are the kind of things that need to go in an evolved structure for our models. Yeah, but anyways, just kind of touch upon the code of conduct. There's a section on the values and principles. There's a section on behaviors they do not align with. And then it's about guidance for de-escalation and conflict resolution. So there's a lot of information here on, how you actually address conflict. I feel like the primary issue I have with the code of conduct is that there's no real core centralized responsibility. So if you have an issue with the code of conduct, you have an issue of how the code of conduct is implemented, there's nothing in the code of conduct or in the rules that explain how that's addressed. So for me, that's one of the most important things that I would add to a model of conflict resolution, is that the conflict itself is governed, right? That there has to be some type of organizational structure and location where the rules are overseen, right? So a lot of organizations might have a rules committee, or they might have, some type of structure in place where rules are addressed in a space, and then typically that's accountable to the actual primary main group, that we're talking about at the Northern California level. So for me, it's a matter of making sure that there's always a way for checks and balances and having distribution of power, so how are the rules changed, right? So for me, it's like, okay, cool, these are the rules. The first question, how are the rules changed, right? Because if you can't change the rules and you can't even question the rules, you can't address anything, then what do you actually have, Yeah, check.
Yeah, there definitely has to be a place where you go for conflict mediation. Just I guess that's what the mod channels are for. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we have moderation for Discord, but Discord's not an organization. Discord is not human beings. Human beings are people talking with each other and communicating. So I think that could be another component of conflict and mediation, other things, where does the organization exist, right? For me, the organization exists with live communication in audio, because if everything's on text and the organization is on text, then you're missing. So I mean, we talk about how everyone needs to be in person, right? And we put so much emphasis on being in person because that's where you're going to get the most deepest connection. So obviously you're going to be much more connected on an audio communication than just by text within Discord,
So you think maybe we should set up a voice channel for conflict resolution? And then that would be the place?
Well, no. A voice communications is a team or a structural committee or a scheduled meeting time, right? Because the schedule itself is the centralization, right? Though there's thousands and thousands of minutes in a week, but if no one knows the minute where you're actually going to go and talk about something, then it's not accessible, right? It's excludatory, right? So the centralization comes in the scheduling of the time when people get on the call to communicate and address, for example, rules or issues or problems, etc. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah. So what, just a regular meeting?
Yeah, I mean, everything's just regular. I mean, I don't think anything needs to be special but for us, it's really just Northern California, and we just don't have enough people. Like, it's literally like there's 3 or 4 of us, right? So, which is better than just 1 or 2. But in the context of our model, we just need to build a model that we all agree with, and then pass it through Northern California, and then share it with other chapters, right? Does that make sense? So we don't need to do anything for anyone else. We just need to get ourselves organized and set up, and then over time, people can learn from us.
Do you know if there are other branches that are working on the same thing? So that, like, I'm just thinking of, like, the reinventing the wheel kind of thing. You're right, like, it would be great to get that set up and then have that system available for others to replicate in their own branches.
Well, obviously we know that national doesn't have space for these kind of discussions because I've been trying for almost a year. But there are states that are chapters that do have these types of discussions, and the primary relationship I have with the 2 primary states, there aren't a lot of active states in GSUS, but 2 examples is Oregon, and on the other side of the country you have Massachusetts. So both Oregon and Massachusetts seem to be functional chapters that have regular meetings and discuss, and not only that, but they get contention and they get issues that occur in them.
Okay.
Because there's passion, right? So typically, if there's no passion, there's nothing going on, right? So, but there's obviously passion and people collide and there's issues going on. So both of those groups in my experiences, have made it very clear that their policy is that if you're not in Massachusetts, if you're not in Oregon, you are not involved, and we don't want to communicate with you. And that's, for me, not what we want in Northern California. In Northern California, we want an open, advisory, collaborative model where everyone's invited to the table. So you could try to get more national group meetings going on, but they wouldn't have any power. They wouldn't have any say to do anything, right? So that's all I can really speak upon it, right? So the two groups that I know have the most engagement involvement in the conflict and addressing issues are two groups that don't want anyone to even come to their meetings.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So in California, it would be great if we had more contention and problems, and then we can address it. We can invite people and then show by example and all that. Ideally, we could record, but that's this space is recording, right?
I'm curious about how many members, even nationally, have ever been involved with the existing, the Democratic Party structures, just even at the local level. Because I feel like there's room to learn from how they structure their democratic processes that can be adapted to, the coalition that we hope to build. Definitely not copy paste, basically, not copy it exactly, but room to learn from that. Because I've been to a lot of local Democrat meetings and caucuses and stuff like that, where local people are very, very engaged, and including in proposing, the proposition of legislation, at the very, very ground level. And I'm just wondering if something like that would be at least appropriate to learn from, so that people have an idea of, and again, that would be something that's very highly centralized, but at least if people are given a means for communication, a means for spreading those ideas in an organized fashion, then, like you're saying, we don't even have the national general strike doesn't even have means for changing the rules. They don't have any methods outlined to do that. So finding and establishing some method for simply communicating that we want to have discussion on this, or that we want to have the ability to propose changes, would be really helpful. And some of the models that are already in existence within the political parties in this country may be helpful to maybe not precisely replicate, but at least to experiment with.
Yeah. Bubbles, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't think that from my experience with TSUS is they're not keen to have other models, to do other models. But there is an effort over in national to have a conflict resolution guide between the code of conduct and the guide for, what's it called, working with conflict in groups. So they're working on trying to come up with a way to handle conflict resolution besides just walk away and cool down, or the other thing is just block that person so that you don't see any of their input. So I don't know if another so what you're describing in the Democratic places that you've been, is it just people all give their opinion about stuff, and then there's some kind of resolution. I mean, I'm sure what the structure is that you're talking about.
I mean, it would maybe follow something like Robert's rules that you would use for board meetings and stuff like that. And that's just laying out a structure for like how do you bring up, how and when you bring up new topics or issues to be discussed by the group. And if we had some type of, protocol for, all right, well, we want to encourage some changes here, but we don't even have anything written into the bylaws currently that like allows us to change anything. What is the system for even bringing up those discussions? So like, yeah, with the Democrats or even with like some of the boards that I've been on, there's procedure, that's like laid out. And yeah, even with any kind of decentralization, I think it would still be good to have an agreed upon, which maybe includes a centralized, but just an agreed upon structure for how we move forward. And again, each location could establish their own bylaws. And if we were all open to it, it would be nice to share what those bylaws are in case we want to change and replicate it. But yeah, there needs to be some flow of communication so that, so that we can all learn and follow similar rules, at least of just basic conduct and order, so that we have some method for addressing these things. If we don't, if there's no way to change rules, and when you have problems, then the problems don't get resolved. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense here, but basically, there was, at the Democrats meeting, there's a few people who are, the secretary and the chair and stuff who were like leading the local meeting. But then anybody during certain points can be like, I would like to propose a bill, and then that bill gets voted on in that, small county room, and then if it gets passed in the county at that meeting, it gets moved on to the state level. And then the state representative sponsors it and brings it up. And then, it gets voted on at the state level. So, like, that's how that specific thing worked. It would just be nice to have some kind of flow of communication where it's like, all right, this is something that we've recognized that we would like to have included in the structure of this organization, and we want to share it with a larger organization. What's the system for doing that? And, having a consistent system for moving that forward.
Yeah. You can go first.
Okay, all right. So a lot of the conflict that we have is people with different ideas in the Discord chat. And it sounds like maybe we're talking about different levels of conflict resolution. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Is that a lot of things get said in Discord, and then people try to calm them down and de-escalate. And if they can't de-escalate, then they tell them to block the person. So, right. I mean, that's just where I'm coming from of the conflict resolution, that's what the procedure is now. And I don't know if that's a good enough procedure.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the problem, like, I don't have any problem with that particular procedure. The problem that I have is that if someone's arguing about the color of Trump's hair and, like, whether or not he's a stupid idiot or, like, a out of control idiot, or, like, how that relates to the, the other perspectives and communism, this and that, and they're just having this huge argument, and it's disrupting everything, and everyone just arguing and complaining about all this stuff that really has nothing to do with GSUS, right? Then it's like, yeah, calm it down, relax, like simmer down, breathe, come back to the discussion in the future. But the idea of lumping that issue with the same issue of like, okay, the core value of GSUS is not diverse, right? And we don't function diversity. We silence diverse opinions. We silence dissent in the organization. That is a core value problem. The structure of the organization itself is fatally flawed. And to do the same thing with both of those, for me, is immoral, right? That you have the same structure for addressing people who are basically talking about shenanigans versus talking about actual important issues that people have disagreements about, you know?
Okay.
So we have the same model for both of those situations.
And so I'm kind of appealing to the one you're talking about, Jay, more so like we need to have structures in place so that when things are not covered and when there are issues, with intersectionality or whatever it may be, there are structural issues with GSUS that haven't been dealt with. Then we need to have means for addressing those issues and those concerns. As far as individual stuff goes, that's exactly what I was trying to point out, the difference between conflict mediation between individuals, earlier when I was talking about individual conflict versus, international conflict or something. Like, there's a huge difference between how we might get two individuals to relax a little and be okay with each other without alienating them, because that's actually really important too. We really don't want to be alienating potential comrades or potential allies. Like, we really don't want to do that. We need as many people in this fight as possible. So ensuring that every individual that has a grievance, if it's with another individual or if it's with the larger organization, doing whatever we can to mediate that conflict, to get understanding on all sides, so that we can move forward collectively and collaboratively. That's really, really important. But there's going to be a difference between how two individuals that are just, nitpicking details about Trump's hair, are going to address their conflicts versus either a group of people or individuals within the organization who are posing grievances against the organization as a whole as it's currently standing. The way that we handle either of those things is completely different. And we need to have systems in place to meet the needs of both of those circumstances. So in order to, when I'm talking about like structural issues that an individual or a smaller group may have with the organization, that's where I'm saying, like, maybe if we followed something like what the Democrats or Republicans or whoever, their democratic processes would be a way to move those grievances along so that they can be addressed collectively. And that's, again, very different than two individuals who are just kind of going at it and maybe need time to cool down. Maybe they do need a mediator, Like, I really think it's important. Like, again, getting into the conversation that Jay and I had a few weeks ago, like, conflict resolution is such a huge deal. And I just feel like in all aspects of society, we need to really value people who are in, like, social work and, like, mediation and stuff like that. Like, we really need, like, a lot more people who are trained in that and, to act as professionals in that. I don't know that we're going to get professionals within GSUS to just volunteer their time for that, but it would be really helpful if more people were trained in nonviolent communication and mediation, so that we had somebody that we can turn to, not just the mods, but maybe the mods, who are trained in this, who can step in and be like, all right, I see you're having a problem. I want to hear both of your sides, and we'll try to work through this, and try to get the people to play nice again. So, yeah, all that. Go ahead.
Maybe get it out of the thread that it's in and into a conflict resolution channel where people can say what they're feeling. Because a lot of times it does kind of mess up the whole thread, the whole feed. it turns into a big conflagration.
There's one thing that I think is definitely correct on here where it says once everyone is calm and collected, have a normal call. It can take place in consisting of 2 admin moderators and both individuals involved in the conflict, and the conflict involves 2 mods, blah, 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 blah. So for me, the call-ins is key because basically my experience is that text breeds conflict. And that when there's conflicts in a text environment, I mean, that's why basically social media is just one big huge conflict and just like shitstorm. It's so manipulative. It's so easy to misunderstand and misrepresent people. It is so difficult to talk as human beings, especially with cultural differences, and say things and have the other person even understand what you're trying to say. Right? It's so hard, even when you're talking. But in text, in social media, it is almost impossible, and it typically is opposite and creates conflict when you're not even trying to. And so for me, the core of addressing conflict is getting out of Discord, getting out of text, and actually communicating as human beings, because that just, you breathe together, you slow down, and you just actually have to go in turns and go back and forth, and then you actually start behaving like a human being, and the next thing you know, you realize that, okay, what was the conflict again? You know, we're just talking, right? So for me, that's like a key core issue of addressing things. But then it's just, okay, well, what are the organizational processes? How does the organization have a meeting? How do you communicate? How do you have topics? How do you have proposals? How do you make decisions? What are you doing in your sessions? And that's all the stuff that's overall missing in GSUS. But in the context of just this idea of following Republican and Democratic structures, I think we should be responsible for learning from those structures. I have lots and lots of experience, primarily from being trained in nonviolence and decision making and group decision making and mediation, all that stuff, facilitation, from the 1960s. I mean, I learned in the early 2000s, right? But from people who learned from the 60s and 70s of the civil rights movements and the environmental movements before they became the sustainability movements, right? So that's how I learned. The experience that I have is actually working directly with my mentors and peers who are much, much older than me, who had all this experience with all these group decision-making collaborative spaces from decades and decades ago. And so it was pretty cool. But a lot of people don't really want to do that. They think that, oh, structure is bad, bureaucracy is bad, everything, making decisions, because you kind of get hooped into like the whole way that social media is these days. And everyone wanting things to go faster. They don't want to have slow space or all that kind of stuff. So anyways, I could go on and on, but I think that there is a lot of things that we can learn from Democrats and Republican models, but that it's not a good way to present it. We shouldn't be presenting like, oh yeah, just go and copy what they're doing, because it's kind of like, for me, there's a lot of issues with the Democratic and Republican models in relationship to the fact that they just disempower our society. They disempower our communities, and they disempower and fragment our civic responsibilities and our civic rights as citizens. It's like in the Democratic Party, if you are not a Democrat, you have no rights, and they don't give a crap if you're a citizen or not. Period.
Well, you don't have any rights even if you are a member of the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So we
know what happened to Bernie in 2016. So
exactly. So they only care about your money, and they only care about your vote, and they only care about your label, right? Which is not going to solve the problems that we're in right now. So
and that's true. Yeah. That is true of the larger DNC organization. I guess I'm not advocating that we copy anything directly. And you're right, like, us learning, I guess that's why I was bringing it up, is like, hopefully I'm not the only one who would bring some of that information to the table, because I'm not always capable of remembering everything, like, you know what I mean, like taking great notes and stuff like that. But it does seem like, as far as learning Robert's rules, learning even Rusty's rules, which I think is probably a little bit better, which is the IWW's. That's the IWW's framework for decision making. The industrial workers of the world.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah, the one big union. So like, learning their systems. We don't have to adopt them, but at least having multiple people who have read those things, those documents, and how things are managed. I mean, you can get, I think I might have a copy of what is it called? The Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules or something like that. You know, like how they always used to have those really simplified books or whatever. Rusty's rules are actually a simplified form of Robert's rules from what I remember, and I haven't read them all, but the IAWW has it on their website. It's just, one way for to keep things on track, to keep things streamlined, and to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have their voices heard. It's just an organizational structure, It's not something that we would have to adopt, but I do feel like the more familiar that we can become with the ways in which other organizations are structured, and like you said, Jay, you learned a lot of this from, veterans of civil rights movements and things like that. I think it's really, really good, like, to have as many different sources that we can kind of piggyback on from different perspectives, so that we can think about and choose the structure that works best for this organization. Based off of history, I just think it's really, really, I feel bad if GSUS does not feel that there's value in understanding that, but like, if we don't know historically how these movements got so big and powerful, and also how they were ultimately defeated in the past, we're doomed to repeat their mistakes. We really, really need to be like very well educated in these types of, proletarian movements, these workers' movements throughout history, so that we can have a better grasp of what worked, what didn't, where the fatal flaws were. And without knowing that stuff, we're really going to be signing ourselves up for failure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I just looking at the Rusty's rules, I don't hate Robert's rules, but I hate Robert's rules because they are not based on human beings, right? You have to be like a computer to understand it, right? So Rusty's rules, great. It's like 20 pages, 10 to 20 pages, awesome. I love it. I think it's a great foundation. So I'm going to kind of bring this into my checkout, because we're going on 2 hours now, which we did an amazing meeting. This was amazing. Rusty's rules could potentially be the perfect medium for the foundational set that then we can evolve for at least Northern California. And what I love about it is that it comes from an international, basically workers, in essence, union, right? It's perfect for the strike model, right? It's perfect. So let's work with that. Let's build that into our conflict mediation models. So I'm gonna read through Rusty's rules. I'm gonna actually update it in terms of like, hey, well, what would that look like for Northern California, and how could we make it even simpler, make it even easier to get started with? Because 20 pages is still a lot. And then from there, how do we incorporate the conflict evolution and the other ideas and evolve the structures? I was looking at one thing I'll mention in the General Strike U.S. Code of Conduct. It does say on every single page, last revised 6/3/25, which would be, I guess the 3rd of June 2025, right? And so that's very interesting. So the question is, okay, well, who revised it on the 6th of June 2025, right? And that's where, of course, the answer is just never actually presented, right? So that would be a cool thing to look into. But either way, what we want to do is we want to take these rules, these codes, and then evolve them to make them as in alignment as possible, but it also evolve them to be as functional as possible for Northern California, and then build through example, because I think that's always the best way of proving movement organizing, is to show through example. Because you can talk forever, but in the end, if you don't actually put your feet where your mouth is, it doesn't really mean anything, So and that means that it's going to take us 6 months or a year. It's going to be a lot of work to build something that is really a beacon to show, as in the other term we use, is best practices. Showing best practices, showing what's possible, and what other states can do. So anyways, that's kind of like my checkout, and just thanking everyone for coming, and just a really, really great session. And I'll keep checking in each week and just keep doing these recorded sessions as best as possible. But always willing to reschedule. Like we could do it once a month, or we could do it other times. But for now, we'll just keep it once a week and just see when they happen. Check.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks for hosting again.
But yeah, you all want to check out? We can do each person and kind of give your last thoughts and everything, and what you want to do between now and the next meeting, or up thing. Like usually checkouts, like how the meeting went for you. You can even give a number. I would give the meeting like a 6.57, right? And then what you are going to be working on between now and the next one. Yeah, two best things.
I can go. I did a little blurb on the conflict resolution guide that we have in NorCal and of what we just talked about. And I will look into rusty rules as well and come up with with ideas about how to codify it for GSUS. And I thought the meeting was delightful. A 7. Check.
I really appreciate these meetings. I kind of like that they're smaller because then I'll actually talk. Otherwise, if there's more than like 4 other people, I'll probably just sit back and stay on mute. But this was nice. It was nice having this really involved back and forth conversations, dialogue, and coming up with some ideas for potential workarounds, potential solutions. I think. I hate to commit to anything because my brain doesn't work that great anymore, but I'm going to do my best to read through all of Rusty's rules and make sure I understand it before our next meeting. And on top of that, I'll be doing all the reading that I usually do, which is just trying to pack as much, leftist theory and anthropology and sociology into my brain and psychology into my brain as possible so that I can better understand the human condition and hopefully better function and help on a collaborative and communal level with other people who are like-minded.
Very, very cool.
Excellent.
Very cool.
Yes.
Yes,
It was nice meeting you, Naomi.
Yes, and I'm going to add...
Bubbles.
Very cool. And I am going to add to next steps the idea of like a work, what do you call it? A leftist history kind of workshop. Leftist history workshop. I think that would be a great thing to have recorded at some point. Just like learning, experiencing the whole history of like movements in relationship to like the strike and how we can learn from what's happened in the past. That would just be an incredible experience, especially to have recorded that people can learn from. And then also, just so you know, my experience with facilitation, the core that I do is like you do the core is the rounds, and then you have the stack. And then when the stack runs out, you just go right back to the round. So even if there's 10 people in the meeting, we always go through every single person, even if they say pass or I don't want to speak or I don't want to do anything, to make sure that every single person gets a chance to speak. So important. And then usually after like more than 10 people, I just say like we need to break up. Like it's like when you have 20, 30, 50 people in a meeting, it's like what's the point? You can't come to consensus. You can't really hear anybody. So like getting into smaller groups is so key. But yes, great session. And one step at a time.
Yeah, I will say I think GSUS was offering some leftist study, and I can't remember, Day I think was one of them, who was leading that, but it was usually a guy, and I can't remember their name, but he was kind of like leading and talking a lot about various leftist theory and stuff like that. So, and I think those were recorded. I don't know if they're on YouTube maybe, but I think a lot of those were recorded. I haven't seen that cropping up lately, so I don't know if they've stopped doing that in the last couple months, but I really valued that for education. And I think expanding on that or bringing it back up would be valuable.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And I mean, having a written version as well would be great too. Basically just like what is the basics, and I'm sure they already exist, some websites on the basics of movements, organizing, and what we've learned from the past and what are the mistakes that have been made. Like, I mean, I could talk about Occupy for hours about all the mistakes with Occupy. That was like, I mean, I put thousands of hours into Occupy, and it just dead ended into I would say the Democrats, but it's like, there are so many things we can learn from that experience.
Right.
And then there's other obviously movements, including the Bernie movement, which we brought up, which dead ended into the Democrats as well, right? So
Right.
the Bernie movement we can learn a lot from too. So, anyways, I'll talk to you all soon, one step at a
Okay.
time. Very exciting.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
Have a good night.
All right. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Night. Bye.